How you doing? Good to see you.
Great
Welcome
to
to
have
the
you on
show.
the
See you guys. Hey, good to be here.
It's amazing having you on the show. Can you give us just the update on what is your day-to-day like? I'm familiar with some of the prehistory, but what are you working on? What are you most excited about right now?
Sure. So I actually, can I project here?
Yeah, please.
Is it possible?
Yeah, you
all
can
right.
share your screen.
All right. So in Q4, we just opened something I'm calling Network School.
Yeah.
Can you guys see the
Yeah,
opening day shot
cool.
there? Yeah. So that was the kind of ribbon cutting.
Cool.
And this is something that combines a bunch of things I care about. Here's like the site is at ns.com. And actually,
Great domain, by the way. A fantastic domain.
Thank you. I appreciate that. You guys are connoisseurs also.
Yeah, we have a 4-letter
TBPNs.
domain. You're kind of destroying us with the 2-letter domain.
You mogged us.
All right.
Balaji.
We will. I still, you're
really
in the
It's a
Four
great domain.
Commas Club or something. I guess I don't know. The Four Characters Club, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Yes,
break it down
more
for me.
important
I
than the
saw
domain.
a 100K fellowship. I also see a
Yes.
school. Typically, I have to pay for school. Are you paying me? How does this all work?
Right. So this is essentially, there's several things that are happening at the same time.
Sure.
Like obviously traditional academia is basically over as we know it.
Yep.
It's about 10 different things hitting it at the same time. It's, lost trust and credibility and so on.
Yeah.
And, what we've got here is we're doing global meritocracy, anybody from anywhere. Obviously Americans are welcome, but anybody who's what I call internet first is welcome, right? So if you're, pro Bitcoin, if you're pro cryptocurrency, smart contracts, and so on, you're pro AI, you're pro biotech, pro nuclear, and whatnot, and those kinds of people exist all over the world,
totally.
and so we're bringing them here, and so global meritocracy basically,
Yeah.
and there's Vitalik, there's Brian Johnson. Can you see the video? And
Yeah,
stuff
incredible.
On screen? Yeah. So,
cool.
so this is it. Basically,
Fantastic
we're actually
lineups.
doing the startup society. So that's what Network School is. There's much more I can say about it, but that's the idea.
Okay, so walk me through the actual experience of joining. Is this cohort based? A lot of these new education initiatives, very few of them have just jumped straight to, we're going to replace a 4-year experience. And I don't know if that's because the 4-year experience is fundamentally broken. There's a lot of things that are potentially broken about higher ed. But what is your view on just the length of time that it takes to get whatever you need to out of academia or schooling generally?
That's right. So, very good question. It's a long topic, but
Sure.
just to level set, I actually spent, 10 years at Stanford. I was an undergraduate, graduate, got my MS in chemical engineering, BS, MS, PhD, electrical engineering. I taught computer science and stats there. I'm a research scientist. I have 5,000 plus citations, did genomics, taught, computer science and so on at Stanford. So I know academia fairly well. And in fact, I thought for the first, 10 years or so of my adult life that I was actually going to be a professor. And then I, started a genomics company and, basically became, got into tech. And my view is there's many things I could say about the 4-year, college education, but one issue is it's like front loading all the cost to the beginning. And then there's zero budgeted for maintenance over somebody's life. So it's as if you paid $200,000 for a car and then zero for oil or gas or, wheel changes or so on for the rest of their life. And so people get this expensive education and they forget all of it just a few years later.
Yeah.
I'm sure if you gave retest, stats and looked at what percentage they actually retained, we know all this stuff about spaced repetition.
Yeah.
We know forgetting curves and so on. So basically the education is gone. And what you really want is something that's like continuous education over the course of your life,
Sure.
where, then like, for example, VO comes out or some new API comes out. What you want is to be able to quickly load that into your brain, be productive, and to have some budget every year in a continuous sense, as opposed to, like a upfront forget everything sense. That doesn't even get into the fact that, unless you've been in the world of work, you don't actually appreciate how amazing it is to have just time to purely study. You have to learn everything on the job. It also is something like front loading the vacation and getting all these kids at age 18 into like a lifetime of student loan debt. There's many, many things wrong with it, but that era is ending. And then what's next? Like my view, why am I doing this? In part because how, actually we'll get right into it. You know how America started?
Loosely.
It was
Boston Tea Party?
America was started by the tech and the bro, forming the tech bro. Let me explain. Okay? So
Amazing.
Okay, here's why. So
break it down.
Massachusetts was the tech,
Yeah.
and Virginia was the bro.
Okay.
There we go. There we go.
Okay, so for those who don't know, like Massachusetts, the Massachusetts Bay Colony, that was the Puritans. They founded Harvard in the 1600s when it was actually just a one-room schoolhouse, basically a one-room place, right? It was a very, very small thing, very modest at the beginning. The Massachusetts Institute of Technology was founded about 200 something years later, but basically Massachusetts has always been the center of like higher learning, education, and so on in the U.S. In Virginia, the Cavaliers, they were the bro. They were muscular, they were on horseback, and they liked to shoot things and so on. And actually, Virginia was maybe the most important state during the American Revolution, and a lot of the early American leaders came from Virginia. That was like the founder CEO archetype, right? And both of these were actually different factions that at different times won and lost in the English Civil War of 100 something years earlier. The Roundheads went to Massachusetts. That was like the left of England, and the Cavaliers were like the right, and they went to Virginia. Anyway, so they basically, when the right and left were working together, that was the tech and the bro, right? And that's what made America really great when they were working together. Now, of course, not as much.
Let's say you have a husband and wife, and they have kids, and one of the adults, wants to participate in the network state, and the other parent is like, well, sorry, the kids are in preschool and ripping them. Like that feels like a large part of the people that you would want to recruit over time. And I can imagine exactly what your kind of answers to that would be, but I'd love to hear it from you.
Sure. So first of all, like my vision that is definitely family friendly. With that said, who moves and who moves at what times, right? So typically people move for education or employment, and they usually move in their 20s and so on and so forth. And once they're anchored in territory, they tend to only move if there's like a job for both husband and wife, for example, or if they're like refugees, like things get blown up, like in Ukraine or in the Middle East or what have you, or if they're like refugees from, for example, blue states, where the policy gets so bad that people just uproot and move, and there's like muggings or something like that, syringes, et cetera. Like a lot of people left blue states over the last 5 years, as you're aware, because of that in part. And I know some people say things are getting better or whatever, but at least in some places, but I think in general that exodus is still there. That's also actually how the U.S. itself was populated at the beginning. There's two different ways of founding startup societies, and they're complementary. The first is the Wild West frontier kind of thing, where you have single men coming out. But the second, actually, the Puritans had quite a few married couples coming out, but because they had an ideological or religious motivation. And then you also had waves of refugees from Europe. There's all kinds of crazy wars in Europe, like the revolutions of 1848, or famine in Europe, like the Irish potato famine, and that also brings like people out, right? But so the answer is there's only so much you can do at the beginning. In a sense, how Dropbox started as an individual product, and then it became a product for small teams, and then for enterprise.
Yeah.
Right. So in the same way, like you first kind of have to build a product that works for like the individual remote worker, then maybe the couple where it's a two-body problem, then like the early family, then the scaled up family, then like the whole community of people who are moving together, or the whole startup that's moving together. And so it's just like, think of it as kind of going from individual to SMB up the ladder like that. So you definitely want families, and we actually have a lot of people who brought families. But the product for families is itself a product, just like Apple has a family plan, for example. There's new permission structures and so on, account structures and stuff you need for families. So
I like how you explain this in product-led SaaS terms.
That's great.
That's great.
I think that makes sense. I'm on the Tech Bros podcast, so I'm speaking.
It's perfect. No, and I totally buy that it's okay for these to initially be frontiers and sort of kind of establish base camp effectively, and then bring more people in over time.
Yeah, on the Bitcoin thing, I imagine that Bitcoin could be kind of the gold standard for many network states if they opt in. The interesting story that I've been toying with Bitcoin is that the narratives have shifted. Bitcoin promised a few things. It didn't deliver entirely on all of those. It wasn't entirely anonymous. It wasn't entirely used for transactions, but it's become a fantastic store of value, and that's kind of where it landed. Do you think that that's the correct story of Bitcoin? And do you think that crypto projects, is there a pattern of this, like shoot for the moon, you'll land amongst the stars? It's okay to kind of build towards like a three-pronged amorphous future, because if one of them hits, you could still wind up with a fantastic power law outcome.
Oh yeah, I mean, like I think it's the only way of doing things. In the sense of it's kind of like people who there's some people. There's one guy who'll remain unnamed who like critiques like Elon's self-driving scheduling. It's like he promised it an X date and it only arrived like a year later. He sucks so much, and I'm like, you know, like I think Elon is saying like Tesla or SpaceX, they turn impossible into late.
Yeah, yeah, that's
right?
a good one.
Yeah.
You'll take that every single day, obviously, in my view, obviously, right? I want to answer to your point. So the way I think about Bitcoin is maybe the obvious way, but it's digital gold, right? That is to say, it is infrequently moved on chain. It stores large amounts of value, and it actually serves some of the purpose of gold reserves, where like you sort of want to show on chain that you have it. It's almost like meant to be public in some ways, right? And then the various kinds of features that people have wanted to add over time to Bitcoin. The problem is that like gold should be as immutable as possible, and mutability is in conflict with, I mean, programmability is a good value and immutable is a good value, but those are like, fire and water, they don't mix, right? There's, you want a drink of water and sometimes you want a hot fire to keep you warm, but you don't want them in the same thing, then you get nothing, right?
Yep.
So immutability, Bitcoin's immutability, its stability, and its predictability, think of it as locked, right? And then what happened was privacy went to like Zcash and zero knowledge, Tornado Cash, which is now legal again, and so on. And zero knowledge is booming. Zero knowledge is one of the big things that people are underpricing, I think.
Cool.
Biotech, arguably another, and so on. Then number two is programmability with smart contracts. That went to Ethereum and Solana and whatnot. Number three, transactions, as digital cash, that went to stablecoins, USDC, USDT. And then other kinds of things like storing data on chain and, using it as an oracle, that went to other stuff like Chainlink and other kinds of things. And then, basically other functions like on-chain data is NFTs, just like on-chain code is smart contracts, that went to NFTs. So all of these things that were initially contemplated did happen. They just happened on other chains that could tolerate the risk, because you have success and failures then, and Bitcoin couldn't tolerate that risk. Bitcoin was locked.
Yeah, yeah. Well, with the zero knowledge stuff, I haven't been tracking it as closely most recently. Are you waiting for engineering challenges to be hurdled? Are you waiting for just more code to be written? I understand that it's incredibly complex code, some of the hardest
hard code.
programming software to
ZK
write.
and Quantum,
or is it more on the customer adoption side? We're ready for on-ramps of kind of the masses, but it's just going to take time for people to build the bridges to actually make these new ZK products just lovable and
Well, first, just to explain what zero knowledge is. Zero knowledge arguably is, and Vitalik's also made this analogy, ZK arguably is to crypto what the transformer is to AI. In the sense of it takes a bunch of things that were previously special case stuff and it puts it into kind of a common framework where you can, lots of special case subroutines can now be general case, to oversimplify. And what that means is you can develop ZK protocols that, for example, ZKYC, where they just prove what is necessary for a government to be satisfied that this is a real human being and nothing else, right? And that's necessary because look at these, these KYC attacks on Raj of Salon and other kinds of people, right? Like the modern form of KYC is where governments force companies to store giant honeypots full of sensitive information. And then the governments themselves are often hacked, like the OPM hack and so on and so forth. So that's one aspect of where ZK can come in and be the solution. Another thing is that ZK is actually used as a compression technology. So for example, ZK rollups, not just a privacy technology. And so this stuff is actually already there and it's being deployed and it's working. There's ZK chains and so on. It's one of those things where, is it consumer visible? Maybe not, but I think it's just a really important technology.
It might never need to be consumer visible, is what you're saying.
I mean, that's right. But what it does basically mean is there can be sort of magical things where you can prove what you need to prove without giving up anything else.
Yeah.
Right. You
I
can
mean, that's
prove you
the
are
way a lot of
right.
KYC stuff works right now. I scan my ID. Most people don't know that there is a machine learning algorithm with computer vision in there that's
right.
reading the ID and checking it with a database. People just know, hey, I scanned my ID and I got KYC'd. It could be a lot easier and it could be more resistant to hacks and leaks, right?
What you want is something like SingPass or Estonia's digital ID, where it's like an app on your phone and that's your ID card. And then that can do a zero knowledge handshake with something else, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to like a piece of paper, like physical card. You know,
How are you feeling about
carry your wallet?
stablecoins these days?
ahead.
How are you feeling about stablecoins these days? I feel like there's an immense amount of energy and excitement, but they always feel a little bit misaligned with the folks who are like, let's get off the dollar. Let's, we wanted to move away from that system, and we're kind of maybe rebuilding it. How are you feeling about stablecoins? Are you optimistic? Do they play an important role in your vision of the future?
Yes.
Cool.
Though I think, well, so let me actually show you guys something. Ready? Here is a fun video.
Okay.
Can you see the screen there?
The stablecoin video is dropping right now. Let's see. Coinbase and Circle announced launch of USDC, digital dollar. Yes.
October 23rd, 2018. And so guess who's there?
Were you behind this? That's amazing. Lore. This is great.
There he is.
I remember this video. Yeah, I remember
Amazing.
thinking like, oh, I don't really understand this, but now I do.
So you were,
amazing.
this is a long way of saying you were early and right.
You were super long stablecoins, but I've heard it's hard to make money.
That's right. And in fact, let me just show you, just to underline, here is the market cap of USDC, which is now $60 billion.
Yeah, wow.
And on October 3rd, let's see if I can get the cursor. Bang. Let's say October 3rd, 2018. Can you see that? Zero.
Yeah. I can't see that, but I can see the broad chart. But congratulations for being early. You're always early. Where are we going in the future with stablecoins? How important are they going to be? Because it still feels like there's a little bit of tug of war with like, we're staying on the dollar. We're not really moving to this future global
legacy
currency.
Financial institutions seeing that we're in a friendlier regulatory environment, seeing the product market fit of stablecoins, now wanting a piece of the action.
Like when the Wall Street Journal reports like the dollar fell in value, like the stable coins also fell in value, right? And so it solves some problems, but not all of them. So what's your take?
Right. So, well, the term stablecoin obviously is historical because it was stable relative to Bitcoin.
Sure.
I think you could sort of separate that out into two things, like a fiat coin and a flat coin.
Totally.
Like a fiat coin is something that's an on-chain mirror of fiat off-chain.
Yep.
And a flat coin would be something that actually retained its purchasing power over time.
Yep.
And that's much harder to do because you'd have to maintain its stability against bread and PlayStations and whatever. And if there's an actual shortage of those things, then price might increase for no reason other than actual physical shortage. So, but keeping the historical name, stablecoins are, so first, why are they useful? Well, at a minimum, they're better international wire transfers.
Yeah.
That alone justifies their market cap.
Totally.
That's like tens of billions of dollars in market cap because they just save you from $25. And more importantly, banks are only open like 9 to 5 weekdays, right? So like from 40 hours a week uptime to 168 hours a week, which is 24/7 uptime, that's worth a lot. Imagine if websites were only up 40 hours a week, right? Yeah. So just that alone, the ubiquity, internationalization, then you add programmability and so on. When people say, oh, why just put $1 on chain? That's why, right? That's why they're valuable, right? And the space is partitioned in an interesting way. And I think many other things will partition this way into like a US and a global, right? Like the USDC coin or the USDC asset is like US regulated. And then USDT is like intentionally non-US regulated, right? Sort of like there's like Coinbase and there's like global exchanges and so on and so forth. I think that'll be a common partitioning of many kinds of markets. And so, that's a justification for why I'm bullish. But now, onto your specific questions, I think that one of the things, once you've got something on chain, it can just be easily swapped, right? And so now that USDC is there, you're going to have probably every other fiat currency up there and what have you, because it's become so mainstream and whatnot. But when that happens, you get an interesting thing, which is similar to the launch of Google News in the mid 2000s. As you may recall, all these newspapers put their newspapers online in the late 90s and early 2000s. Then when Google News launched, it suddenly showed that the Des Moines Herald and the San Francisco Chronicle and NYT WAPO Miami Tribune, whatever, were all basically printing the same stuff. There was some custom stuff that they had in their own markets, but most of it was just reprinting the AP.
The Newswire.
Right?
Yeah.
Newswire. And you can see this on Google News. It's like 173 other outlets printed this story.
And
or
it's
whatever,
all the same story every time. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's because those newspapers, they had trucks and they had, used to say, never argue with a man who buys ink by the barrel. Now, never listen to a man who still buys ink by the barrel. Lol, right?
Okay.
Because, they're,
I love it.
are you buying any ink? I actually like pencil and paper to write, but not to print, right? Certainly not newspaper.
Early days. We went through a lot
Early
of
days.
Never fight with a podcaster who live streams for 20 hours a week.
Something like that. Exactly. Let's beat you on. Exactly.
Yeah, this is the modern version.
That's right. So point being, though, that they had these geographical monopolies that suddenly they put their stuff online and there was a delayed reaction. And suddenly they realized, wait a second, every newspaper's in competition with every other newspaper. And so, of course, all the local ones without any brand basically just all died. And only the national ones survived. And they became much more ideological. And the new partitioning of information space was on the basis of ideology, not geography. So you've got the, Jim Bros, and you've got like people who are interested in, I don't know, various political causes. You've got crypto causes. You've got things sectioned by vertical rather than geographic horizontal, ideology rather than geography. Okay. So the same thing is going to happen with assets. And the reason is, first, you've got these fiat currencies that are put on chain. And then we're nearing something which I call the DeFi matrix. The DeFi matrix starts with the observation that fiat can be swapped like Forex, but fiat crypto can also be swapped like USD BTC, and crypto can be swapped like BTC ETH. And of course, crypto can be swapped for NFTs and all kinds of this crazy menagerie of digital assets that are now out there. So you visualize this giant square of every asset that can be traded for every other asset. And there's amazing numbers of crazy financial machinery out there now that will basically do the complexity of finding buy and seller pairs, like Uniswap and market makers and so on behind the scenes for this swap. What that means is that whatever asset you have less need to get into a fiat currency. You can just hold that asset, and then when you want to, you just liquidate it for whatever other asset you want at some fee. Okay? What I mean by that is, what do people call it? What's a highbrow way of saying when you sell your company? You get a
liquidity event.
Liquidity event. That's right. That's another term of talking about cash. Cash is liquidity. Cash is universal barter. Cash can be traded for anything. But now anything can be traded for anything. Which means there's less need for cash, right? And so all these countries will wake up one day and they'll find, wait a second, just like the newspapers, we had a geographical monopoly on our fiat currencies, but now we don't, and we're competing in this global marketplace of all these other cryptocurrencies as well as really big fiat currencies, right? And then they're going to have to compete, just like the information environment, you compete on ideology rather than geography. Then in the transaction environment, you have to compete on features, not places, right? So for example, privacy coins or smart contract coins and so on and so forth. You compete on the vertical as opposed to the horizontal of France coin, which is a franc, and Japan coin, which is JPY, right? And it's a funny way of putting it, but that's like what they are, right? So I'm not saying there isn't any utility to geography, but especially given that so many of these things, what have people done? All these countries have gone cashless, right? Cash, physical cash, was actually something that tethered people to a geographical area because you needed to actually hold it, and it was issued there and redeemed there and so on and so forth. Once you go digital, you don't have to use cash anymore. And many people have, for example, crypto cards where they can hold in one currency and spend in another. And it just, Apple Pay or whatever just works, that people don't know, right? So stablecoins are an intermediate form that facilitates this transition from the fiat world to the pure crypto world, kind of like putting newspapers online was an intermediate form. And just like there was a whole battle in the 2010s where newspapers at one point felt threatened. Oh my God, I mean, not at one point, they still feel threatened, but they fought this whole battle of the bulge counterattack on social media, tried to take away your voice, my voice, everybody's voice, but they lost. You know what I call when Elon took over X? You know what I call it?
What do you call it?
X Day. It's like D-Day, right? All the good guys amassed $44 billion for like the Normandy landing, boom, right? Like this, because it was still technically illegal. They were like, if you want your own company, why not build one or whatever to get free speech back? Remember those kinds of lines of argument prior to, right, 2022? And then Elon basically gathered the forces, and every tech guy, like some Marvel movie, put in a bill, 5 mil, whatever they could afford, pass the hat around. I mean, $44 billion in cash is like go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's just funny passing the hat around and Morgan Stanley puts in 13 billion in debt. It's kind of classic.
Yes. So every center right, centrist, center left in some cases person who
Totally.
just piled it because Elon obviously was the man, but so many people backed him, right? And this was something where like, you know, Thor landing with a hammer, boom, like this, right? Poof, all of these communists just fly back against, you know, the walls. All these wokes just defeated like this. And X day, right? Now, what that actually also meant was a Tower of Babel kind of moment because Twitter no longer exists. There's X, there's Truth Social and Gab and whatever all on the right. And there's Blue Sky and Mastodon and Threads and TikTok on the left. And there's the crypto networks like Nostr and Lens and Farcaster and so on, right? So you have a Tower of Babel moment where Twitter has been shattered.
Anyway, this has been fantastic, Balaji. Thank you so much for stopping
You're welcome to come on and screen share with us anytime.
Yeah, this is great.
Awesome. Great. Maybe I can be your Kramer special
And
guest.
thank you for kicking off.
I would love that.
We have I think 10 plus other, you know, exciting crypto entrepreneurs.
Should be a big day.